Hello, everybody. Welcome. All right, we've already got some friends joining us. Hello, brokerage owners. Colorado Springs, Irene, yay. Great to see you here today. And we'll just ask everybody to type in. Let us know where you're joining us from. We are here in the sunny San Diego area, and we're happy to be here with you today. We are excited and on fire about our topic, which, as you know, Blue Ocean Strategy. Got my little book here. Who else has their book? Okay, Blue Ocean Strategy, How to Create Uncontested Market Space and Make the Competition Irrelevant. And that is exactly what we've been talking about, is about how to make the competition disappear with your waving your magic wand, and all of a sudden all that head-to-head competition disappears and you are out there on your own, which could be very exciting but also very scary because you're in uncharted territory and you're doing what no one else has done, and there's, it's not comfortable. You're outside of your comfort zone. And we're going to talk about that today when we talk about some of the hurdles that we have to overcome. All righty. Who else is checking in today? Happy to see everybody here. We are going to be tackling Chapter 7, and this is session number 7. We're also going to talk a little bit about this book. Can you see it? Leading Change from John P. Cotter. This is from the Harvard Business Review Press. Excellent, excellent book. He has actually written several books on this topic and a few other books. This is definitely one of the best, so we'll talk about this too. And also we have a little surprise for you. It's going to be a new, not a business model, but a theory about different types of markets that we're in. It's something I made up myself to explain 5 different market types. Now, normally when we take an economics class, we hear about a seller's market or a buyer's market. Well, I've actually drawn out a little grid, and I have 5 different market types. We'll be explaining all of that with you here today. So who is ready to get started? Woohoo! Happy Wealthy Winning Wednesday, everybody. Gonna go ahead and get our slide going here. Okay, there we go. Be the boss. Dominate your market. Real estate brokerages that innovate, differentiate, and capture unique market share with Blue Ocean Strategy success. Today is the 7th of 8 sessions. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to your new future without competition in a blue ocean instead of the bloody red ocean. Today's quote is from Martin Luther King Jr. And because our topic is about leadership, I thought this was an appropriate quote for us. It says, "A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus." So if you're searching for everybody to agree and you're trying to get them to agree, that's great. But to be a leader, you have to actually teach people how to agree. You have to set the standard. You have to put the vision out there. You have to mold people into your vision instead of trying to gather everybody around their different visions. So again, that is a definition of a leader, is somebody who is going before others and putting themselves out there first. So today's topic, 7th of 8 sessions, is overcome key organizational hurdles. Now, our first session was creating the Blue Ocean Strategy. We introduced all the various pieces and parts of the blue ocean and the whole concept. And then in session two was analytical tools and frameworks. And in that session, we talked about some of the various tools that we're going to be using, including the strategy canvas that we've been using almost every session. In session 3, we reconstructed the market boundaries, regardless of what the conventional wisdom in the industry is telling us. Number 4, we focused on the big picture instead of number crunching. Number 5 was reaching beyond existing demand. So that's looking at the non-customers. Number 6 is the right strategic sequence, which is going through each step of forming the new concept for the new business. And today is overcoming key organizational hurdles. So we're going to find out about the 4 main types of hurdles, how to overcome them, and we're going to look at a case study from the New York City Police Department. So that'll be pretty interesting. And then we have another book for you as well, the Leading Change book. Next session, which is unit number 8, is build execution into strategy. That will be our final session, and the chapter in the book is not very long. We're not going to spend much time on the chapter in the book. Most of our time will be focused on actually going through this process. So we will have a mock company, and we will go through each of these blue ocean strategy processes, and by the end, we will have a new company. So this will be sort of a demonstration of all the steps we've learned put into action with a sample company. Okay, I think you all know me by now. We won't spend any time on that. But again, I am certified to teach the Blue Ocean Strategy because I completed the Blue Ocean Academy with the authors of the book. And by the way, get the book if you don't have it. I think we all have it by now. And they also have a second book, Blue Ocean Shift. Our topics for today will be tipping point leadership in action, disproportionate influence factors, leaping over those 4 hurdles: cognitive, resource, motivational, and political, challenging conventional wisdom, and then we will have the 5 market strategies, and we'll also talk a little bit about this book, Leading Change, and some great tips for you there. Now, I know this has not been an easy topic. It is a little challenging. It's complex. It is definitely on the advanced side, and it's not for everybody. But leadership is something that we can all get behind. We can all agree, that great leadership is needed in a company to move it forward. You can have a great idea, wonderful concepts. You've done your research. You've crunched the numbers. You've looked at the competition. You've studied the results. You've projected your profits. But if you don't have the leader who's going to take charge and lead people through the process, execute and make sure that every task gets completed, then it's sort of, pointless to go through the process. Who is that leader? That leader is you. You are the leader. You are the person who is responsible for putting all of this into action and moving your company forward. You are the person that's going to be out there taking the risks and making changes and probably getting some unpleasant feedback from people who don't want to change because they're stuck in their comfort zone. So how do you deal with that? And how do you continue to be that leader? So let's keep going here. We have a little case study here. This is from the New York City Police Department. And let me know if you've read the book, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Anybody have that book and has read it? Let us know in the chat if you've read the book. Okay, if you've read the book, you remember that this was one of the case studies in the book. And it's a really good example. It's not a for-profit company, it's a government agency. So their main motive wasn't necessarily to make a profit. They had an even greater charge, which was to clean up the streets of New York City, to take most of the criminals out of the way, to make the city pretty and appealing, to gain their reputation back in good standing with residents and tourists. And they had a lot of problems. I mean, the city just had tons of crime. There were so many issues that were not being addressed, and people had gotten used to lack of crime enforcement, and things were just let go and things were overlooked. The courts were busting out at the seams with cases they felt they couldn't handle anymore. There was corruption internally, which is never a good thing when you're trying to change the organization for the better, because you have to deal with that first. And they really needed somebody to be a tough leader and come along and make these changes. So enter Bill Bratton. So he was appointed police commissioner in February of 1994. And anybody else might have thought this was an impossible task. Murders were at an all-time high. Muggings, mafia hits, vigilantes, armed robberies. New Yorkers were under siege. Their reputation had gone down. People didn't feel safe. They weren't proud to be living there. And many social scientists had said, this is not something the police can intervene in. The problem is just too big. But he didn't let that deter him. And the New Yorkers appealed to the mayor, Dave Dinkins, and asked him to do something. But, the law enforcement there did not have good pay. They had dangerous working conditions, long hours, and not much hope for them and their careers. So the morale, as you can guess, was at an all-time low. And there were budget cuts, dilapidated equipment. There was rampant corruption. So how do you come into an organization like this and make a change? How do you bring a vision to a lifeless organization, bring new energy, and get all of these people whose morale is down to buy into your vision, so much so that they take action along with you and they become the tipping point? Because a tipping point is when there's a mass of people doing something, so much so that it causes a massive change in the entire industry, or in this case, we could say the entire city, right? So one of the things that they did is they, and we're going to talk about this more later, but one of the very first things that Bratton did was to stop trespassers from jumping across the subway turnstiles. Now, you may think that's small and inconsequential, but it sent a huge message. And they started from the bottom and worked their way up. So instead of starting at the bottom with the big crimes, they started with the small ones. Every time the gangs would go in and they would paint the trains, the very next day, the paint was stripped off and they were painted over. So they had no success. Even the people who were jumping over the turnstiles to save a few bucks, which was happening pretty much all day long, every day, each one of them was arrested. They brought massive police force in and just started arresting them one by one by one by one. And they actually had so many arrests, I think they had to bring the van, the jail van there instead of, transporting them one by one to the jail. And even though it seems like something small and inconsequential, it was something that made a difference. It changed people's mind. It changed their motivation, and it made them start to make changes in other areas. So because it was a focused change and it was starting at the bottom. And actually it took about 2 years for Bratton to make this turnaround. There was no increase in his budget, and he turned New York City into the safest large city in the United States. He was stuck in a red ocean. He broke out the entire city to a blue ocean, and he did that using a unique strategy. And we're going to be looking at some of that. Not only did it help the crime rate, but also the businesses started prospering and becoming more profitable. The government didn't have to use so many of its resources, and actually cash was freed up. The public confidence jumped from 37% to 73%. Employees started experiencing job satisfaction. Morale went up. And also, the changes outlasted its leader. So what Bratton did is he created a wholesale change that lasted way beyond his term, and that's called a legacy. And that's what we're creating here today, is a legacy that is going to outlast us and what we're doing, just as one little person with a big vision and getting people to buy into our vision. Okay, so that's one example. And we're going to talk about that a little more. There they are, waiting at the subway for those, lawbreakers, those mischievous turnstile jumpers, so they can nab them, send them to jail for something as simple as, breaching the subway entrance. Now let's talk about disproportionate influence factors. In any organization, fundamental changes can happen quickly. If you were to look at New York City and see the crime rate and all these problems, you would think, oh my gosh, it would take 10, 15 years to change this. But it happened in 2. Amazing. How did that happen? By channeling the beliefs and energies of a critical mass of people, getting them to buy into your vision, showing them what's possible, and creating an epidemic movement towards a central idea. Helping them experience that and having them be part of the change. And again, the key here is concentration, not diffusion. Not trying to tackle a million things and be spread all over, but focusing on one thing and working your way through. As we said, the New York City Police Department, they started with one thing, very, very basic at the bottom, which was arresting all the people who didn't pay their fare and jumped over the turnstiles to get into the subway. Something small, but they were extremely concentrated, and then they just kept moving up the ladder to bigger and bigger criminals till they were able to change the whole perception of the city, both the employees and the residents and the criminals. So the 4 hurdles that we're going to leap over are cognitive, resource, motivational, and political. And there's our little diagram here. A cognitive hurdle is, it says, an organization wedded to the status quo. That's really people's mindset. That's probably the toughest thing to change. Wouldn't you agree? A political hurdle. Opposition from powerful vested interests within the company, all of that political power, and how do you make sure that you have the right people on your side who are going to be sharing your vision and helping to spread it rather than opposing you and shutting you down. We have the motivational hurdle. That's staff with an all-time low morale. We have the resource hurdle, which is no money, no equipment, not enough staff. And yet with all of these, massive changes can be made with a blue ocean system. A cognitive hurdle, as we said, it's employees that have the old mindset. So how do you wake up employees and let them know that there needs to be a strategic shift? Red oceans are comfortable. How many of us have seen the company where people love to go to work just so they can complain about the boss and the company? They complain about how horrible it is, and yet when they're asked to do something new, they complain about that too, even knowing that the new thing might be able to eventually make them more comfortable. Well, it's sort of human nature. People keep doing what they've always been doing because it's comfortable. The red ocean is comfortable. A red ocean is what we've always been doing. We've always been competing in the real estate business head to head with all the other brokers doing the exact same thing they do, and we're comfortable in that spot. So why rock the boat? And the team needs to be aware of this. And the key is getting the team to be aware and helping them experience the harsh reality firsthand. So bringing them into part of that experience, making them part of that experience. So instead of the boss saying, you do this, you do that. Now everybody's on the front line. Everybody's experiencing this, and everybody wants to be part of the change. So there's our lightning bolt, right? Cognitive hurdles. Okay, so let's talk about tipping point leadership. That does not rely on numbers to break through the organization's cognitive hurdle. To tip the cognitive hurdle fast, tipping point leaders, such as Bratton at the New York City Police Department, zoom in on the act of disproportionate influence, which is making people see and experience the harsh reality firsthand, as we said. Seeing is believing. We've heard that before. And people, when they feel it, they experience it, then they are able to move to the next step, which is change. And change is difficult for people. It's easier for them to sit back, to be a little bit emotionally distant, point their finger, and complain about what everybody else is not doing. Okay? So as an example, in the New York City Police Department, Bratton was criticized because he started with the subways, but they said only 3% of the city's major crime happened on the subways. So people at first did not see or understand what he was doing. And he didn't do it by force. He didn't argue with numbers, but by making top brass and middle brass ride the electric sewer day and night. Until he came along, that had not been done. So all of the people in the organization who were above their, in this case, customers, which were the people riding the sewer, their local residents, or I'm sorry, the electric sewer is what they had nicknamed the subway, just because it was so bad at that time. So they actually got in the subway and rode the subway every day, and they could see the problems firsthand. So instead of being distant, they were immersed and engaged and participating along with their residents, along with their customers. Resource hurdles. That is a problem because many companies trying to make a change don't have the budget. They don't have more money to throw at the problem. They don't have not just capital, but maybe equipment, tools, staff. So how do you do that? How do you make a change when you don't have more? And the key is to, instead of focusing on getting more resources, concentrate on multiplying the value of the resources that you have. And there we have our little lifeline. So it's time to be creative and think outside the box instead of doing what's always been done. So here's how you jump the resource hurdle. You redistribute your resources to your hot spots, redirect resources from your cold spots, and engage in horse trading, which is kind of a funny term, but let's talk about what each of these means. Okay, the first thing is hotspots. Those are activities that have low resource input, but high potential performance gains. In other words, areas that we could be at in the future, but we're spending all of our time, effort, energy, money on the cold spots. Cold spots are activities that have high resource input, but low performance impact. And you're going to have to think a little bit about your real estate brokerage. What would be a hot spot? What would be a cold spot? Where do you spend a lot of your time and energy that really you could be redirecting that, instead of spending it there, spend on where you'd like to be? So one example that comes to mind is you have real estate agents, and maybe you have non-performers or low performers, and maybe you're spending a lot of time and resources and energy on training them and trying to bring them up to the level you'd want to be, goal setting, meeting with them, mentoring them, throwing them leads that never come to fruition in a closed transaction. And maybe you can redistribute those resources to your hotspots, and maybe your goal is to bring in new agents. So instead of spending all of the resources on existing non-performing agents, you open a school and you bring in and license brand new agents and spend your time and effort that way, training them your way. I hope that example makes sense. Horse trading, what is that? That's when you trade your unit's excess resources in one area for another unit's excess resources to fill the remaining resources gaps. And so horse trading is just swapping out resources from one area to another. If you have a lot of resources going in one particular area, maybe you want to change it to a different area. So for example, maybe you're paying for online leads and you're paying $5,000 per month. And maybe you can change that and start building your own internal lead source at your company that's not dependent on an outside source. I hope everybody's learning a lot. This is such an awesome topic. Motivational hurdles. How do you motivate key players to move quickly and diligently? Well, there's only one way, and that is break away from the status quo. Stop doing what you've always been doing. Stop throwing resources at the place you've always done and consulting with the same people you've always consulted with, and instead look to something that's new and different that you haven't done before. Okay, so here we have our motivational light shining. All right, so here we're going to show you how to jump that motivational hurdle. Irene says, learning a lot. Woohoo! Awesome. Glad you enjoy it. Jump the motivational hurdle. Our goal is to zoom in on the kingpins. This is a 3-part blue ocean strategy. What is a kingpin? A kingpin is a person of high influence. That is a person who is a key person or influencer at your company. It's somebody who is a leader, although that person may or may not have the title of leader. It's somebody that others look to for leadership, and they follow that person. They're people who are natural leaders. They're well respected. They're persuasive, and they have the ability to say something and other people follow them. So you're going to zoom in on those people, identify who they are, and then you're going to put them in a fishbowl. What does that mean? That means you're going to spotlight their actions and make sure they know there's some accountability. As an example, and by the way, that is based on transparency, inclusion, and a fair process, right? So as an example, at the New York Police Department, Bratton's Fishbowl was a bi-weekly crime strategy review meeting known as CompStat. It brought together the city's top brass to review and the performance of all of the 76 precinct commanders in executing its new strategy. So all of those top commanders were being reviewed for their performance every week. Okay. Attendance was mandatory for all precinct commanders. 3-star chiefs, deputy commissioners, borough chiefs were also required to attend, and Bratton himself was there. As each precinct commander was questioned on the decreases and increases in crime performance in front of their peers, again, there's that accountability, and superiors, enormous computer-generated overhead maps and charts were shown, visually illustrating in inescapable terms the commander's performance in executing the new strategy. So again, the transparency, each one of them was put on the hot spot and their performance was shown in front of everybody, and it was compared with where they need to be. So there is a lot of pressure. There's an enormous pressure to make sure that you are on board with this new strategy, because everybody is being scrutinized publicly among their peers. And the last one is to get the organization to change itself. Autonomize to get the organization to change itself. What does that mean? That relates to the framing of the strategic challenge, one of the most subtle and sensitive tasks of the tipping point leader. People have to believe that strategic challenge is attainable and that otherwise change will not succeed. In the case of the New York City Police Department, Bratton's goal was very ambitious. In other words, people laughed because his goal was so big, they didn't believe he could do it. And especially 2 years. They thought it was an impossible dream. So he had to make the challenge attainable. And what he did is he broke it down into pieces. Bite-sized atoms is what we call it. And he went through New York City. His goal was to make it safe block by block, precinct by precinct, borough by borough. And so by focusing on little goals and breaking it down, now it's measurable. Not only is it transparent, but it's measurable and it's doable. And I know you've heard the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, just one little bite at a time. And then you look back and pretty soon you've eaten the whole thing. So same thing for them. Each officer had a goal, and their goal was to make their city, their beat, or their block safe. Not the whole city, just their beat or their block. So each person was responsible for a specific area. And then the commanders had to make their precinct safe. And that's it. So everybody had a concrete goal that fit in line with that person's capabilities. And when each person is doing their job, they can't say, oh, that's not my job, because it's within the scope of their job and they're held to that standard and they're being accountable. So you can't move masses of people at once, but you can move them. You can move key leaders and the masses will follow. And key leaders can be moved if you have the right goals and the accountability in place, and you break it down so it's achievable for each of them. Now let's talk about political hurdles. How many of us are familiar with those dreaded office politics? Womp womp. Right? Over by the water cooler where everybody's gossiping about everybody else. And as soon as you leave the water cooler, they're probably gossiping about you too, right? And those political hurdles are very strong. They're not based on formal leadership roles often, but I put on here groupthink. In other words, we have to follow what everybody else does. And that is a really hard nut to crack of the political hurdle. And here we have a storm, a storm on the horizon. When you come into your company and you try to make a wholesale change, and guess what? People are not ready for it. They're going to undermine you. They're going to try to work against you, right? They're going to subvert your progress. They're going to sabotage you. How do you break from that? So the blue ocean strategy suggests the best way to knock over the political hurdle is to secure a consigliere, or a respected senior insider, on your top management team. And that is a person who others will follow, a key leader, and bring that person into your fold. You probably have a handful of people on your top management team who are working hard to make these changes. So bring that person in, and they will begin to help make the change and get others on board. Again, it's about your top management team. Who are your angels and who are your devils? You have to know who's going to naturally align with you. And no matter what change you make, that person will be enthusiastic and on board and following you. That person might have a lot to gain with the strategic shift, and they might have a vested interest in helping you. So leverage those people. Those are your angels. On the other hand, you probably have the devils, which are the people who are going to fight you. They're argumentative. They'll never do what you want them to do. They feel like they have something to lose by changing the organization. And those are your people that you need to make sure they are silenced. But don't fight this battle alone. That can be too much for one person. Get the higher and wider voice to fight with you. In other words, identify who your detractors are, the devils. Identify your supporters. Forget about the people in the middle that are, can go either way, and focus on the people with the strongest voice. Okay, so what you want to do is create a win-win outcome for both the angels and the devils, your supporters and your distractors. So the first step is to isolate your detractors by building a broader coalition with your angel before the battles begin. Get more angels with you and on your side. And you're going to discourage the war before it has a chance to start or gain steam, because the devils will know they're outnumbered and their voices won't be as powerful and they won't be heard. Let's look back again to the example of Bratton at the new policing strategy. One of the things that happened is the New York City courts were not in lockstep with his vision. They felt they were already crowded. They were underfunded. They didn't have enough staff. And so they pretty much ignored small crime like prostitution, public drunkenness, those people who were jumping over the turnstiles to board the subway. They pretty much didn't even want to deal with those. So he had to speak with them, talk with them, find out what their concerns were, and bring them into the fold so that they could go to bat for him instead of opposing him and everything that he's doing. So he talked with the mayor, the district attorney, the jail managers, and he assured them and showed them how the court system could handle the added quality of life crimes, and that focusing on them would, in the long term, actually reduce their caseload. And they were sold. They decided to come on board. They intervened, and the mayor, who could have been his biggest enemy, became his biggest advocate. And he went to the courts and told them, the courts, you need to pull your weight. And by pulling your weight, the crime rate is going to go down. It's going to take a little bit of work right now in the beginning, but in the end, it will be better. So when you bring those advocates on board with you, then you can definitely make changes because they're fighting the battles for you. They're your front line going in front of you. Okay, challenging conventional wisdom. Well, I don't think that needs too much explanation. That's really what we've been doing all along here for these 7 sessions so far with Blue Ocean Strategy, isn't it? Our whole Blue Ocean Strategy is to challenge that conventional wisdom, to say that, hey, all the other brokerages are competing head to head. There's a red ocean here. I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to say, I don't have to do what everybody else is doing to be successful, to be profitable, and to make a difference in my community and with my agents. Conventional wisdom says we're going to do the same thing we've always done. We're going to focus on transforming the masses. Tipping point leadership says, no, we're going to choose wisely a few key influencers. We're going to win over those key influencers, and then we will let them influence the masses. And that is the tipping point leadership. So actually, I do have a little chart here. Let's see what screen I can put it on. Whiteboard. Okay. I'm going to darken up the whiteboard a little bit here. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see how I can draw with my little mouse here. So in the first illustration, this is conventional wisdom. And we have right here your mass of employees. Mass. And the theory of the organization change rests on transforming the mass. And this is conventional wisdom. I guess we could type it here, right? Conventional wisdom. So this requires a lot of time and steep resources. And as you can see here, it requires a lot of resources to get to that mass. On the other hand, we have down here tipping point leadership. Okay, well, let's type it in there. Tipping point leadership. And in tipping point leadership, we have extremes. Okay, I am not writing this well. I'm trying to do it in cursive so I don't have to pick up my little mouse. Okay, I don't know if you can read that, but it says extremes. And then over here on the other side, again, we have more extremes. Okay. Let me erase this. Let me just try to type this in because I am not doing very good with this writing tool here. I'm just going to type this in here. Extremes. So you can see there are extremes on either end. Right, we have extremes on this end and extremes on this end, and this is the tipping point leadership. Instead of trying to ramp up to the mass, it's looking at extremes on either end. So in tipping point leadership, to change the mass, you're going to focus on the extremes, which means people, acts, and activities that exercise a disproportionate influence on performance. And by doing that, we'll achieve a strategic shift faster and at a lower cost. I hope that makes sense. And I hope you are starting to think about who in your company are the key influencers and who can help you with this. If you're a one-man band, like many of us real estate brokerages are, there's just one of us, broker owner, you will need to think about who your agents are that are leaders, or your team leaders, or who you can bring onto your team that's a leader that can help you with this. Does that make sense, everybody? With the conventional wisdom tries to influence the mass here, right? But in tipping point, we don't do that. We worry about the extremes on either side, and we get them to then bring the energy to the mass. Okay? All right, Blue Ocean. Woohoo! We're learning a lot here. Who's still excited? Let's keep going. Okay, I promised you a little surprise. So that's my 5 real estate market types. This is something interesting that I actually researched and put together when I was working on my real estate degree a few years ago. And this does relate to Blue Ocean strategy. And I'll let you sort of think about how to relate it. But first, let me explain it. The first thing is that we can see there is a seller's market. Now, the seller's market, I'm going to get my little red marker here. Okay, so here we have the seller's market. In a seller's market, the demand is high and the inventory is low. I mean, this is one of those things we learned back in Real Estate 101. And the prices are climbing. They're going up. In comparison, over here, we have a buyer's market. And in a buyer's market, the inventory is high. It's completely the opposite, and the demand is low. And in that one, the prices are dropping. Now, most of us are in a seller's market right now, and where we would really like to be is a stable market. A stable market is when there is medium demand. It's not too high, it's not too low, and there is medium inventory, not too high and not too low. In other words, buyers have an opportunity to purchase the house. And in a quickly upward moving market, buyers are often left out and they end up paying more, or they end up not buying at all. So the ideal, of course, is a stable market. You want days on market not to be, you list the house on Friday and you have 5 offers by Saturday. And you don't want it again to be that where the prices are just keep falling and falling, and the sellers just have to keep dropping their prices. The ideal market is a stable market right in the middle. But what happens when demand is high, right, and inventory is high? Now, that is what I call an investor's market. That's when prices are rising. They're not high yet, but they are rising. And we saw that happen back after the crash. We saw that when prices were starting to pick up, investors were waiting. They didn't know if prices were going to keep going down or up. Some of them did invest when the prices were still declining, and then they got out of those houses or those properties when they realized that they had purchased at a bad time. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know where the market's going to go, if it's going to keep going up, keep going down, stay the same. But a lot of investors were stuck in this market. This is what low demand, low inventory, and this is what I refer to as a banker's market, because the prices kept going down and down and down. They were declining so far. Nobody knew where the bottom was going to be and when they would keep coming back up. So investors, I mean, this is the REO market. This is the foreclosures, the auctions, the bank-owned properties, the short sales, right? So that's the banker's market. Investors who bought in this market, they saw prices go down, they run and jumped and bought something, but then the prices kept going down even more, even more, even more. So investors who bought when the prices were going down and didn't intend to hold for the long term, they were doing a short-term fix and flip, they lost big time. Whereas those investors who bought once the market started going up, right here, right, rising prices, they bought at a good time because they bought low and sold high. Now, again, if an investor or an owner-occupied resident or a commercial property owner buys at any given market and they hold on for the long term, it's been shown that over 10, 15 years, most likely there will be a good return. So if you hold on for the long term, you're not going to feel the pinch. The problem is that most people sell after 5 or 7 years, or in the case of investors who are doing fix and flips, they're selling, flipping right away within 3 months, 6 months. So they can be very affected by the market. So that is my little real estate market types. Again, there's 4 types I've identified: seller's market, low inventory, high demand, sellers can select from many offers; an investor's market, which is high inventory and high demand. The rapid sales and appreciation is just going through the roof. We have the buyer's market with high inventory and low demand. Buyers can be picky, demand repairs because they've got a lot to select from. You have the banker's market, which is low inventory and low demand. Sales are stalled. There's many foreclosures, short sales. And then the ideal, which is a stable market. That's where both inventory and demand are balanced. There's a steady pace of sales. The demand is steady. It's not too high. It's not too low. I hope we go back to that soon. I don't know if that's happening in many markets right now, but I still do see a seller's market here. And we know when you have a seller's market going on for too long, eventually what comes up has to come down, and it will eventually go back down again. And we did see that 2004, 2005, the values just kept going up and up so rapidly, right? And we knew eventually it had to come down, but who would have known it would come down so low to cause a nationwide and worldwide recession or depression in some cases. All right, so that's our real estate market types. I hope that you're able to think about that and how you can apply this to your blue ocean strategy as you are developing your concept. Lastly, we're going to finish up with this book, Leading Change by John P. Cotter. This is about transforming organizations. He goes through an 8-stage process to get your team on board with you and to create a learning culture there at your real estate brokerage. Now, changing people is difficult. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go so far as to say we cannot change people. People have to want to change themselves. However, as leaders, there are many things we can do to prepare and cultivate the environment and the culture to lead people down the path that we would like them to go, and to share our vision, get excited about our vision, and be champions, ambassadors for our vision and influence others around them. So in this book, Leading Change, the 8-stage process, and if you don't have the book, I suggest getting an Audible or Kindle or the paper copy or all 3. I think it's just a really awesome book. Again, this is an international best-selling book for a good reason. So the first thing is to establish a sense of urgency. That's the first stage, is that people need to know that there's a pain point and we need to fix it quickly. We can't just continue living with this pain point and get comfortable with it. And then create a guiding coalition. That's where you pull in key influencers who are going to be ambassadors for you, and together develop a vision and a strategy that will take you through to the future. In this case, we're learning about blue ocean strategy. So of course, we're going to be developing our blue ocean strategy. And that's going to have a far-reaching vision. And then communicate that change vision, the new vision, the part where we're all going to have to change, the scary part. Tackle that head on, communicate that with your team, and then empower them for broad-based action. Give them the tools, give them the resources and the authority to be able to make the changes in their area so that they can be part of transformation. Generate short-term wins is important, just like with the New York City Police Department. They didn't start with going after the biggest mafia king or the biggest boss and the crime boss. They went after small things. They went after those people, hundreds every day, who were jumping over the turnstiles and cheating the subway by not paying their fare. And by doing that, they got short-term win, short-term win, short-term win, so many that it built up and it created massive change. Consolidate all those gains and use that to produce more change. I've always said that success breeds success. So as you have one success, it leads to more success and bigger successes. And you want to anchor these new approaches in your culture. Again, your culture needs to be that of a learning environment where people are not afraid to learn and grow and develop, where they're not afraid to make mistakes, try something new, move forward, be big and bold, be different and unique. Now you try it. You have a strategy canvas. Try implementing your new blue ocean strategy. We've talked about different ways that your company can do this. And next week, we'll actually have a hands-on with a mock company. We'll go through the strategy canvas together. We'll go through all of the different tools from the blue ocean strategy, and we will apply that to a real estate brokerage on a couple of different levels, and we'll see what we come out with. It's going to be pretty exciting, so make sure you're tuned in next week. What hidden icebergs lurk below the surface? We don't know, but our Titanic boat is sure to hit them unless we have scoped out the water underneath. And we know it's not all smooth sailing. In summary, our topic today was overcoming key hurdles or obstacles in the organization. And we focused on tipping point leadership in action, disproportionate influence factors, those 4 hurdles: cognitive, resource, motivational, political, challenging the conventional wisdom. I gave you a cool little chart for the 5 different market types. And then lastly, we dove into John P. Cotter, Leading Change in Your Organization, which is a classic best-selling book. Oh, and there it is. And today was chapter 7 in Blue Ocean Strategy. So any questions? Be sure to type in the chat. Let us know if you have any questions. Today, as always, we do offer you our daily planners. We suggest that you get one for each of your agents and your agents to be. What is that? Those are your aspiring agents whom you're interviewing every week, and they will be coming on with your company. And of course, we have our masterclass. Our masterclass with 12 course bundle includes online access, activity worksheets, bonus content, resources, and so much more. We're adding interviews, leadership, legacy leadership interviews to some of the courses. Very exciting. Normally the price is, okay, let me put the offer up. Normally it's, okay, let's see, do I have this? Okay, here we go. $590. Okay, so even at $590, it's still a great discount price for all 12 courses because they're normally $99 each. But here you get them bundled. Today's an even better deal, $295 special rate for all 12 classes. Now, if you're listening and you already have the 12-course masterclass bundle, you probably haven't taken the time to go through all of it, do the worksheets, and work on your business. So I encourage you to do that today. Pull your calendar out, put aside 2 hours a week, just 2 hours, when you can work on your business, not in your business, and go through the questions and answers, go through the video. You can stop and start, as you need to, write things down and start working on your business and get excited about creating something new, better, and different to maximize your profits. Again, we are always available for consultations for brokerage owners, and we have some great new topics coming up after this one. There's my contact info. Thank you again, everybody. This has been Be the Boss and Dominate Your Market. Real estate brokerages that innovate, differentiate, capture unique market share. Again, with Blue Ocean Strategy Success. Okay, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us today, for taking time out of your busy day, and continue working on your business. And again, come back next session. Join us as we walk through a mock company together, and we'll put all of the pieces together, and you'll be able to see the Blue Ocean strategy in action at a real estate brokerage. Irene says, thank you, Regina. It's been outstanding. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. And for everybody else listening, watching, learning, we wish you well, and we'll see you in Session 8. Woohoo! Keep going and having a great Wealthy Wednesday today. Okay, bye, everybody. Irene says, thank you so much. You're welcome. Bye, Irene.